The Krell warship descended through the amber sky of Colony World Epsilon 7 like a falling blade. Commander Zexistar watched through the viewport as his elite shock troops deployed across the human settlement below. This would be another easy victory, another conquered world to add to the Krell Empire's expanding territory. The humans had proven surprisingly resilient across the galaxy, but this backwater farming colony had no military defenses, no plasma shields, no orbital cannons, just farmers and their families. Zextar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Krell had studied humanity extensively over the past decade of conflict. They knew human weaknesses, understood their primitive attachment to their young, recognized how quickly they surrendered when their children were threatened. It was a proven tactic that had worked on 17 previous colonies. His troops moved through the settlement with practiced efficiency. The humans scattered like frightened prey animals exactly as expected. Women grabbed children and ran for the surrounding forests. Men attempted to organize some pitiful resistance with farming equipment and antique firearms. Within minutes, the Krell had herded most of the population into the central plaza. Sergeant Krasinal led his fire team through the eastern quarter of the settlement. His thermal scanner detected a small heat signature hiding behind a storage unit near the animal pens. A child, probably no more than 6 or 7 years old by human standards. Perfect. Nothing motivated human surrender faster than having their offspring at gunpoint. Krasinal signaled his team to fan out and surround the position. The child had nowhere to run. As they closed in, the small human emerged from behind the storage unit. A female child with tangled brown hair and dirt on her face. She wore simple farm clothes and clutched a stuffed toy animal to her chest. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she stood frozen in place, too frightened to move. The sergeant raised his plasma rifle, setting it to visible targeting mode so the red dot would appear on the child's chest. The psychological impact was always more effective than actually firing. Let the parents see their child in the crosshairs. Let them understand the consequences of resistance. He activated his communication implant to broadcast to the entire settlement. "Humans of Epsilon 7, his synthesized voice boomed across the plaza. "Your child stands in our sights. Surrender immediately or witness the price of defiance." From the plaza, Zextar nodded in approval. This would end within seconds. But something unexpected happened. Instead of the anticipated screams and immediate capitulation, a strange sound emerged from near the animal pens, a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Krasinal kept his rifle trained on the child, but his secondary eyes swiveled toward the source of the sound. Behind the child, something moved in the shadows of the animal enclosure. Something low to the ground, compact, with silvery gray fur and distinctive white stripes running from its head down its back. The creature emerged into the light with an almost leisurely confidence. It was no larger than a Krell's torso, walking on 4 stubby legs with long claws that scraped against the dirt. Its small black eyes fixed on the sergeant and his fire team with an intensity that sent an unexpected chill through Zextar's observation feed. "What is that creature?" Zextar demanded through the comm channel. "Some kind of guard animal?" One of the tactical officers consulted the xenobiology database. "According to our files, Commander, that appears to be a Terran species called Mellivora capensis, common name honey badger, native to Earth's African continent. Classification indicates it is a mustelid, a type of mammal. Size, approximately 0.9 meters long. Weight, 12 kilograms. Threat assessment, minimal." "Minimal?" Zextar clicked his mandibles in amusement. "It's smaller than a Krell youth. Krasinal, eliminate the animal if it approaches. Do not let it distract from the mission." But the honey badger had no intention of being ignored. It positioned itself directly between the fire team and the child, its body language shifting from cautious observation to unmistakable challenge. The growl deepened, becoming something primal and terrible that seemed far too large to emerge from such a small creature. Krasnal adjusted his aim toward the animal. Hostile creature approaching, requesting permission to fire. Granted, Zextar replied. Remove the obstacle and secure the child. The sergeant's plasma rifle hummed as it charged. The honey badger stopped growling. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then, with explosive speed that defied its stubby-legged appearance, the creature charged. Krasnal fired. The plasma bolt seared through the air where the honey badger had been a microsecond before. The animal dodged with impossible agility, zigzagging across the ground in unpredictable patterns. Another trooper fired, then another. Each shot missed as the badger closed the distance with terrifying velocity. It hit the nearest Krell soldier like a small missile. Despite weighing only a fraction of the armored trooper's mass, the honey badger's momentum and fury knocked the warrior backward. Before the Krell could recover, the badger was on him, claws and teeth finding every gap in the armor plating. The soldier's screams cut across the communication channel. "It's shredding his suit!" someone shouted. "How is it penetrating Krell combat armor?" Two more troopers moved in to assist their fallen comrade. The honey badger released its first victim and immediately engaged the newcomers. It moved like liquid violence, impossible to pin down, impossible to predict. When one soldier tried to grab it, the badger twisted in midair and latched onto his arm, teeth grinding through synthetic armor fibers and into flesh beneath. The Krell warrior howled and tried to shake the animal off, but the honey badger held on with the tenacity of a creature that had evolved to raid beehives and fight off lions. It didn't matter that its opponent was 3 times its size, covered in advanced armor, and wielding weapons that could vaporize a building. The badger's entire evolutionary history had prepared it to not care about such mathematical disadvantages. Krasnal attempted to get a clean shot, but the badger moved too erratically, using the bodies of his own soldiers as cover. Another trooper went down, his leg armor torn open, tendons severed by those terrible claws. The honey badger had identified every vulnerable point in their equipment within seconds of engagement. "All units converge on the animal pens," Zextar commanded, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Neutralize that creature immediately." A dozen more Krell soldiers rushed toward the chaos. The honey badger saw them coming and didn't retreat. Instead, it intensified its assault, moving from one victim to the next with the efficiency of a natural-born killer. Blood mixed with hydraulic fluid from damaged armor servos. The screams of injured Krell warriors created a symphony of chaos that echoed across the settlement. In the plaza, the human colonists watched in stunned silence. Then, slowly, that silence transformed into something else. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. Then another. Soon the sound built into something approaching a cheer. The little girl behind the honey badger hadn't moved. She stood exactly where she'd been when the Krell first targeted her, watching the small creature defend her with unwavering ferocity. Tears streamed down her face, but she no longer looked terrified. She looked amazed. "That's Sergeant Stripes," one of the human colonists said to another. "The kid's pet. Been bottle-feeding him since he was a cub after his mother died in the winter storms." Zextar felt something unfamiliar stirring in his thorax. Was it fear? Impossible. The Krell feared nothing. They had conquered 47 species across the galaxy. Yet this small Terran animal, this creature that weighed less than a standard plasma rifle, was dismantling his elite shock troop with contemptuous ease. More soldiers engaged the honey badger. It took plasma fire to its shoulder, fur singeing, skin burning, but it didn't slow down. The pain seemed to make it angrier, more determined. It ducked under one soldier's guard and went straight for the neck seal, the most vulnerable point on Krell armor. The warrior fell, gasping for breath as his suit depressurized. "Use heavy weapons," Zextar ordered. "Incendiary grenades, maximum yield." "Commander, The human child is still in the target zone, the tactical officer warned. Zextar hesitated. The entire invasion had been predicated on taking hostages, not creating martyrs. If they incinerated the child along with the animal, it would invalidate their entire strategy. But if they couldn't stop one small creature, what did that say about the Krell Empire's military supremacy? The honey badger solved the problem for him. After sending another 3 soldiers limping away with torn armor and shredded flesh, the creature suddenly broke off its assault. It backed up, positioning itself once again between the Krell forces and the child, blood dripping from its muzzle, fur matted with wounds that should have killed it 3 times over. But it was still standing, still ready, still absolutely refusing to yield. The Krell soldiers formed a semicircle around the honey badger, weapons trained, waiting for orders. The creature's small black eyes swept across them all with the contempt of an apex predator facing inferior competition. It growled again, that deep, impossible sound that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and primal in Earth's evolutionary history. Commander Zextar made a decision that would haunt his military career for years to come. All units, fall back to the landing zone. Prepare for immediate departure. Commander? Krasnal's voice crackled with disbelief. We outnumber the creature 40 to 1. We can overwhelm it with sustained fire. At what cost, Sergeant? Zextar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among his species. We've already lost 7 soldiers to combat injuries. That animal has sustained multiple plasma hits and continues fighting. Our mission parameters do not account for this level of resistance from a creature that shouldn't even be combat capable. More importantly, Zextar realized something that sent cold certainty through his nervous system. If humans kept creatures like this as pets for their children, what else was the Krell Empire underestimating about this species? Throughout the galaxy, the Krell had encountered humanity's technology, their weapons, their ships and soldiers. They had calculated victory percentages based on measurable military factors. But this was something different. This was a glimpse into the kind of world that produced humans in the first place. A world so hostile, so unforgiving, that even the small animals possessed the ferocity to stand against overwhelming odds and refuse to break. The Krell began their withdrawal. The honey badger watched them go, blood-soaked and victorious, still standing guard over the small human child. As the warship lifted off, abandoning the conquest, the colonists erupted in celebration. They surrounded the honey badger and the little girl, maintaining a respectful distance from the still aggressive animal until it finally recognized the threat had passed. The girl knelt down, and the honey badger limped over to her, finally allowing itself to show weakness. She wrapped her arms around the wounded creature as medics rushed forward with emergency supplies. "You saved me, Sergeant Stripes," she whispered into his torn ear. "You're the bravest thing in the whole galaxy." Across human space, the story spread within days. The Krell Empire's failed invasion of Epsilon 7 became legendary, not for the military tactics employed or the weapons used, but for a single 12-kilogram mammal that looked at an elite alien strike force and decided they weren't taking his human. Xenobiologists among the human military began compiling reports about Earth's various species, sending them to Fleet Command with urgent recommendations. If the Krell hadn't properly assessed the threat level of a honey badger, what else were the galaxy's predatory empires underestimating about humanity's home world? The reports made for disturbing reading. Creatures called polar bears that could weigh 800 kilograms and had no natural predators. Great white sharks that had remained evolutionarily unchanged for 400 million years because they'd perfected the art of being apex ocean predators. Saltwater crocodiles with bite forces that could crush steel. African elephants, intelligent enough to hold grudges for decades and strong enough to flip vehicles. And those were just the megafauna. The truly horrifying entries came when researchers detailed the smaller creatures. Bullet ants with stings rated as the most painful in the entire animal kingdom. Stonefish that were practically invisible and deadly venomous. Box jellyfish that could kill within minutes. Mosquitoes that had caused more human deaths throughout history than all wars combined. But the honey badger held a special place in these reports. Here was a creature that wasn't the largest, wasn't the most venomous, wasn't the fastest or the strongest. Yet it possessed something that made it legendary even among Earth's terrifying wildlife, an absolute fundamental refusal to acknowledge the concept of surrender. Evolution had crafted an animal with thick, loose skin that made it nearly impossible to grab or injure, incredible pain tolerance, surprising intelligence, and the combat instincts of a creature that had survived by raiding beehives, fighting leopards, and eating venomous snakes. And humans kept them as pets. The broader implications rippled through galactic politics. The Krell Empire quietly shelved their plans for further invasions of human colonies. Other species took note. If humanity came from a world so hostile that even its small mammals could dismember armored soldiers, perhaps the galaxy had seriously underestimated this young spacefaring civilization. On Epsilon 7, Sergeant Stripes recovered from his wounds with the kind of resilience his species was famous for. The colony erected a statue in the central plaza showing a honey badger in mid-charge, commemorating the day when one small animal changed the course of an interstellar war. The little girl visited the statue every day, usually with Sergeant Stripes waddling along beside her, completely unaware that he'd become a galactic legend. To him, he'd simply done what honey badgers had always done. Protected what was his, and absolutely refused to back down, regardless of the odds. Years later, when human diplomats met with former Krell military commanders, the aliens would occasionally ask about that day on Epsilon 7. They wanted to understand how something so small could be so terrifying. The humans would smile and explain that Earth was a world that didn't produce soft species. Survival there required something beyond size or strength. It required heart, determination, and the willingness to stand against impossible odds simply because backing down wasn't an option. "We call it HFY," one diplomat explained to a confused Krell admiral. "Humanity, fuck yeah. But honestly, it applies to all of Earth's children. We come from a world that taught us one simple lesson. When something threatens what you love, you don't calculate the odds. You don't measure your chances of success. You just fight, with everything you have, until either the threat backs down or you do." The Admiral's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "And honey badgers never back down." "Neither do humans," the diplomat agreed. "We learn from the best teachers." In the end, the Battle of Epsilon 7 became a turning point, not because of the tactics employed or the weapons used, but because it taught the galaxy an important lesson about humanity. They were a species that evolved alongside creatures like honey badgers, and somewhere along the way, they'd absorbed that same fierce, unbreakable spirit. The elite troops of the Krell Empire had taken aim at a child, expecting easy victory. Instead, they encountered the concentrated essence of Earth's evolutionary heritage in the form of one very angry, very determined honey badger. And in that moment, they learned what the galaxy would spend the next century coming to understand. When you threaten what humans love, you don't just face humanity's weapons or technology. You face the spirit of every creature that ever clawed its way to survival on Earth's unforgiving surface. You face the legacy of a world that produces animals like honey badgers and humans brave enough to befriend them. And that, the galaxy would learn, was a fight no one could win.